God puts us in nations, in places, not by mistake, but to do a job. What if we opened our eyes to the needs of our colleagues, of our leaders, of our subordinates, and we were a priest on their behalf? Welcome to the Repurposing Business podcast. My name is Brett Johnson.
And I'm Lynn Johnson.
And we're going to be talking about how to get our business into God's business. Our subtext is Let My Business Go, and we'll have guests from around the world. So thank you for joining us this week and every week on the Repurposing Business podcast. Well, welcome to the Repurposing Business podcast. My guest today is André Holtshausen. André, great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Brett. It's good to be here. Thank you.
And André is in the UK, although a South African, and he's one of the expats that's floating around, like Elon Musk, I suppose.
He's floating in space soon, isn't it? So that's not quite me, but yeah, would you say?
Yeah. And so, André, why don't you tell us a bit about your background and where you came from and how you got up in the journey and how you ended up in the UK?
Yeah, thank you very much, Brett. Where do I start? I mean, I'm qualified as an accountant. Worked in Cape Town, Bellville at the time with Coopers and Lybrand. Later became part of PricewaterhouseCoopers as we have it today. So I did my articles with them, went on a secondment to London, and worked with PWC for a few years there, then transitioned to a large financial institutions intermediary, listed company in London, worked for them for about 6 years as a head of internal audit and risk management. As part of that, traveled the world quite a bit to do visits to all kinds of offices. So that was an interesting journey. And I've visited many places where I promised my wife I would take her back to. Not many of that have materialized, but nevertheless, here we are. And I think to pivot back to where I find myself today and where I find myself today and where that story came from. I mean, during the time of working in London, a few of us were doing a few charitable activities, and we're looking for ways to streamline our process. And I stumbled across an organization called GivenGain that started at about 2001. We were really impressed with the technology they had and what it can do for the charitable world. So I started to journey with the two brothers, Johannes and Jacob van Eden, who started that venture. And looked at a few other opportunities to use the technology in different ways. Did a few pitches in London to see where we can pivot the technology into other sectors, and sort of jumping in stages here. And then, I mean, the one thing that landed, a few things that we tried, but the one thing that landed was using the same technology to fulfill a need within the property sector, handling transactions for letting agents or property managers.
Right.
And there came a point in my life in 2005 where the Lord challenged me about what's next. That's perhaps a bit of a more detailed story, which we can go into. But that resulted me in resigning my job in London. And in the year that followed that, I joined the guys of GivenGain, firstly in London with the idea to work there. But it worked out that I needed to go back to South Africa to help to set up the business PayProp, which I'm still involved in today. So I was then on that journey with PayProp, and that's where we first met, Brett, when I did the Repurposing Business course with you guys. And that journey was an exciting journey that continues to this day. Then I just progressed through where PayProp went, established the business in South Africa, handed that over to a management team, then started to get involved in establishing the business in overseas territories, traveled quite a lot. And then there was a need for me to potentially be based in London, which was quite a tough journey for us as a family to go through that and get to a point where we believe that God pointed us to move to London. So that happened in 2017, and I've been based in London, just south of London. We live in Sevenoaks, where our business is based. I've been here since the middle of 2017, and more recently, I've just taken on some responsibility for our expansion plans in the North American market, so a bit more travel. involved now.
Fantastic. So let's just back up the bus a little bit. So you're a chartered accountant. You're working eventually for the right firm, PWC, which is fantastic. Actually, I remember when there were 8 big audit firms, and then there was a potential merger back then with Deloitte, which didn't happen. I mean, we were down to reallocating clients in Cape Town and everything, and then it got mixed. But eventually, the firm started consolidating. So GivenGain, so let's unpack that a little bit. So GivenGain was put together by a couple of South African guys, and you came across them while you were in the UK. And in essence, I know we can go and look at givengain.com, and I don't know if they're at .org as well, but so what is it essentially, and how does it work?
Yeah. So GivenGain, I mean, if I talk about how it was born, was at the time, one of the 2 brothers he was working in the US. He wanted to send money back to his mum's church in South Africa, and found it extremely difficult and not cost effective to move, say, $500 from the US to South Africa. And they realized that is a need for charities globally. So the first thing was to establish a platform with banking rails that will enable donations from anywhere in the world to give to charities anywhere in the world. So that started out as a business way back, as I say, in 2001. I have to say, there's probably a very important point that coincided time-wise for me in terms of a calling on my life, where I really believe that the Lord has called me to be involved in the release of kingdom finance for kingdom expansion. I mean, that's the way I wrote it down way back then. It's taken up quite a different shape and form as the years progressed, obviously. But in essence, that's what GivenGain still is today. It's a fundraising platform. It has evolved into a tool that I used a lot with event organizers, Boston Marathon, Cape Town Marathon. Many of these big events make use of the platform to enable their participants to fundraise money for charities. Charities obviously sign up with GivenGain directly if they want to. They can also use the tools through social media and all of that to create stories about what they do, and in that way to encourage people to contribute to their cause. Yeah.
So if I go to your site, there's a map I can search. If I want North America, I can drill down into where I am. I happen to be in Chattanooga. Today I went and tested. I found a charity there that's doing stuff, and you can go and you can give some money to them, pop in your PayPal or your credit card, and you can do that. And these are charities that have registered with GivenGain, and GivenGain vets them to make sure that they're legitimate.
Yeah, so I think the one thing that differentiates GivenGain from other fundraising platforms is the fact that we do verify or vet the charity. So we would want to see the organization either be registered with the authorities within the region where they operate. And in that way, we know that the money goes to a registered and a legitimate cause.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So a charity registers with you, feed the homeless or whatever it might be, schools for Africa, orphanages, whatever they might be. And they register with you. They let donors know that this platform can be used. This is one scenario. And then people can use your platform to get the funds cost effectively to them. And is my understanding that you're able to be cost effective because of your relationship with PayProp, which was really a spin-off business from GivenGain? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting story, and some people have said sometime somewhere someone will write a book about it being in the reverse to what we often find in the business world, where people start an enterprise, and when it becomes profitable, they decide, okay, I really need to do something philanthropic as well, and many people then start a foundation or set up a charity or whatever. Right. We've had GivenGain. It was from the start set up to service into the charitable world. We established a foundation in Switzerland through which it's running. And because of us being able to spin off the technology into a pure for-profit enterprise, we've been able to support the activities of GivenGain just through staff contribution. We have many staff members that work on both sides, but the time that we spend on GivenGain is really part of what we give. as part of what we do as an organization, we give all staff members 12 days in the year that they can devote towards charitable activity in addition to their normal leave. So in that way, people contribute to the GivenGain cause. Obviously, the organization has grown, now have a set of employees that are dedicated to the GivenGain activity. And as you said, charities registered on the platform, but because of the additional features for fundraising and so on that has been added in recent years, sometimes it's those with fundraisers that bring the charity to the site. So someone has a passion for something and they find the platform an effective way to raise funds, and they will invite the charity to say, I want to raise funds for you. Please register on GivenGain. Or we work a lot, as I say, with large events. So those events will also introduce the charities that are supported through the event to make use of the platform. It offers a lot of aggregated reporting, so organizations, events can see very well what the impact is of what they do through the reporting mechanisms that sits within the GivenGain world as well.
And scale-wise, Andre, how many countries are we talking about, donor countries and recipient countries?
Yeah, I mean, you're catching me out there because the stats are on the website and they are updated from time to time, but we are effectively collecting from 150 plus countries globally. So it's really where anyone sits that want to make a donation. We pay out to close to 100 countries in terms of where charities are based, if not more at the moment. So yeah, so it is as wide as that. As I say, that we use Switzerland as our hub where our foundation is based. So effectively all the donations come together there and then we can distribute from there in an effective way as well.
Well, I didn't want to catch you out, but this morning when I was checking the website, it was talking about like 194 countries. And so well, that is there's 75 countries with registered GivenGain charities, but then there's like 194 countries or something on the other end. So it's quite a wide scale. It's not just 5 countries here, 5 countries. No. It's quite considerable. Yeah. Yeah. So that's fantastic. And so your overhead costs are pretty low compared to some comparable sites because of the relationship with PayProp, right?
Yeah, definitely. We, as I say, that we have many parts of the infrastructure that we use across the different businesses that support that as well. So if you were to set up GivenGain as a completely standalone business, it will cost more. It should be an interesting exercise to do one day.
So it's fantastic. You've got a charity, you're sitting in some part of the world, you can register with GivenGain, you can let donors know, they can be giving effectively money out of their country, the UK, Europe, North America, for example, into a Swiss charity that then pushes the money down into the local charity, wherever that is.
Yeah, that's right.
Fantastic.
And just to emphasize the fact, I mean, because we sit there, we are tightly scrutinized by the Swiss authorities. So that's partly why, but it was our modus operandi from day one anyway. But I mean, that's why we also need to make sure that we track exactly who the charities are that register on GivenGain, and that we can verify where the money is going and how it's being utilized.
So a high degree of legitimacy, transparency, insight into what's going on. That's fantastic. Yeah, so it is unusual to go nonprofit, if you like, into a business that's then complementary, symbiotic with that nonprofit. It's a fascinating thing. And then have there been any grandchildren of GivenGain? Like what's been the, have others seen your example and followed your example?
That's an interesting one, Brett. Not that I'm aware of, to be honest. In my journey, I've obviously stumbled across many other organizations that have a larger kingdom focus. And one that both of you us know very well is the Marathon Foundation, that has a very strong basis of operating in that way, where a large part of that organization is owned by a foundation that utilizes its resources and the proceeds from the for-profit businesses to expand Kingdom and to support Kingdom expansion, whether that is more Kingdom businesses or purely into evangelical mission work. I mean, their support is quite wide-ranging, as you know. There are obviously many other fundraising platforms. I'm not aware of any one of those that have been set up in the format that GivenGain has been set up. There are other platforms like that that are for-profit platforms that run the business on behalf for charities for that. I guess the one that has evolved that is quite an exciting enterprise as well is Stewardship Services in the UK, which is an organization that grew out of the need to support churches mainly in their fundraising endeavors, as well as compliance with charitable requirements. And I mean, that business has evolved to offer more and more needs. At the moment, that is very UK-centric. It's a great business. I've got a lot of respect for people they do amazing things. And what excites me in recent years, actually, is as I see networks starting to form amongst many of these organizations. So the recognition that there's a space for all of us to do what we do, and even more so the opportunity for us to collaborate and strengthen each other's offerings in order to make a bigger impact is a exciting part of the evolution for me.
Yeah. So Andre, delving a bit into your personal side, thanks for that info on GivenGain. You know, people look at accountants and they say, seriously boring people, left brain, follow the path of logic. And I tell people I'm a recovered accountant. You know, I'm not sure I could balance a checkbook, but in your case, I know that you're somebody who hears God, who follows God's leading, and you alluded to making a career decision and alluded to God leading you in some way. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I mentioned the first thing that happened on the retreat where I really felt that Lord, but it's probably starting way back when I was 15, 16 years old. I had a real sense, and I can't describe it to you, and a moment, sort of a Damascus moment where I was walking one day and there was a light, but I just knew when I was 15 that I was going to be an accountant for the Lord. Now, in many respects, the typical shape that takes is that you're always a treasurer wherever you arrive. So whether that's the youth group or the church, wherever. So I've found myself in that space ever since then, always the treasurer for a mission organization or a church, whatever. Then there was that moment in 2001 where it was more defined. I felt by God to say, you will be involved in the mobilization of Kingdom finance for Kingdom expansion. Right. Then it was the journey which started with GivenGain. I was, as I said, working in London, enjoying my job, sort of a lot of dynamics there, and an interesting, exciting place to be. And actually for us as a family, we had 2 children, the third one was on the way, and we were just looking at potentially buying a bigger property. We had some savings, and I actually had a potential bonus payout on its way. And separately, both me and Annalisa felt that the Lord is saying to us, the money is not for another property. So we started to pray about that. I said, so Lord, what is it for then? And I felt the Lord said to me, well, resign your job and then I'll show you, which was quite for an accountant. I have to admit, I immediately started to draw up the list of in which order will I sell things in order to continue to support the family if I need to go that way. But that was quite a moment for me. So early 2006, I resigned, not knowing where I was going to go. A funny story as part of that was I handed in my resignation and felt that the Lord led me to put a paragraph in there to say, I don't know where I'm going to. I feel there's a call on my life by God. So the CEO of our company at the time called me in and said, as I walked into his office, he said, you bloody Christians, we should throw you all to the lions. So that was his take on it. But an amazing few things happened there. And that's a very important part of my testimony is 5 days later, I woke up in a cold sweat and thought, what did I do? And I was walking into London the day, off the train crossing London Bridge. And I was walking over the bridge. I picked up a 50p coin. And as I picked it up, it was as if the Lord was saying to me, don't you worry, if you need 50p, I'll give you 50p. Went into work, came back after work. And again, as I was crossing London Bridge, my phone went and one of my colleagues said, did you see your picture in the papers? And I said, what do you mean? He said, grab an Evening Standard. There's a picture of you in the papers. So I grabbed the Evening Standard at the station, and as I opened it, as some of these papers often do, they had a competition where they took a picture of a crowd of people and they circled a person. And that person was me as I was walking across London Bridge that same morning. So that was what the picture was. And I won £50. Still have the paper in as evidence of that today. And it was as if the Lord said, 50p or £50, I will look after you. Yeah. And the next day, the CEO called me back in again and said, I don't understand it, but I can see you don't have plans for where you're going. So until you know what you need to do, you can work for us as a contractor on the terms that makes best sense for you. There was just incredible provision of from the Lord in that obedience of resigning before I knew what was coming next. And then just saying, I've got your back. I'll carry you through this. So that was quite a significant moment for us. And then we prayed about it. And then the GivenGain connection then became more than just a connection. We realized, well, that's probably the next place where I need to live out my vision to be involved in that.
I'm reminded of the George Mueller story. You'll remember him, the German guy who came and started many orphanages in England and would never tell people his needs, but he was planning to expand one of the orphanages. He felt that he needed to go from, say, 300 kids to 1,000 kids, hadn't told anybody. But a child came to him one day as he was walking in front of the orphanage and gave him 3 pennies, I think it was, and said, Dr. Mueller or Mr. Mueller, this is for the new orphanage. And he took that as a confirmation, even though it was just 3 pennies. So your 50p and your £50, it's not the amount, it's the principle of the promise of God to provide. I remember I was just thinking about it yesterday when I felt to resign as a partner at KPMG and to go to a different company. And I took about a third cut in my pay. And God said to me, don't worry about the money. Don't worry about the money. And just, it's a comforting thing. And so, yeah, very good. Okay, so now you're out on your own. You're exploring the relationship with GivenGain. And were there any, was this just a logical leading, a conviction in the heart, or were there any other unusual confirmations around this thing? How did you proceed? Was the 50p good enough confirmation?
Yeah, no, I think there were conversations I had with good friends that I was on spiritual journey with. So we prayed about it when the opportunity, we explored the opportunity with GivenGain a bit more. Wasn't sure whether that means it's time to go back to South Africa. Initially, we thought it was going to be working in London and trying to establish the business in London because the guys from GivenGain were really looking at that. But as the months went on, it became clear that there was a need for us to consolidate and really establish the business well in a market that we knew well. To be honest, we were trying PayProp in the UK, but the banking world wasn't ready for us. Right. We've already, PayProp was set up and operational in South Africa. But what we were able to do with the banks, because it is both platforms are bank integrated and requires a very tight integration with the banking rails. And the banking world in South Africa offered us more and the capability, which we couldn't do until about 2012 in the UK. So we came back a few times. The banks kept on saying to us, it's impossible what you guys are trying to do. Kept on saying, well, we're already doing it. So it took a bit of time for us to be able to come back to the UK. So and then that confirmation to go back, there were a few things. I mean, when we originally came to the UK, we came for 18 months. So we never expected to stay 11 years. So we were always on our way back. So when our first children were born, we were actually registered them with the school in South Africa. Kind of forgot about it. It's a Christian school in Durbanville. And while we were praying about that, they sent us a message to say, you've registered your children with us. Are you still interested in this space? You know, so it's little things like that, which just happens at the time when you think about stuff. You think, oh, think about that. Is that another way of the Lord saying to us, it is time for us to be back in South Africa? So then we moved back to South Africa back end of 2006.
No, when I moved to the States in 1986, I was surprised at how backwards the banking infrastructure was in the US compared to South Africa at the time. Partly because of all of the states, each having their own laws. And
Exactly.
So we were trying to send money monthly to somebody in Oregon, and they wanted us to go to the bank with a letter every single month requesting the transfer. Whereas in South Africa, you had 4 provinces at that stage, and you could bank anywhere, anytime, electronically across the country back in 1986. So I know it's hard for first world people to think that the banking infrastructure is more advanced in other nations, but it happened to be the case.
Yeah, well, I think the reality of that is also something that when we talk about what the legacies are and what we are facing in terms of the world of payment rails nowadays. The first will just add more legacy and more embedded systems to deal with in the new world. We were able to ignore all the legacy and just start with fresh technology. You know, so it was always easier, I think, for the new world to jump onto modern technology quicker. The US specifically, as you say, have the challenge that there are many state-only banks as opposed to national banks. There's no central clearinghouse as such. I mean, that's obviously developing, and there is nowadays the ACH system and all of that, but not all the banks participate in that. So it's even today, as we now taking PayProp into the US market, we do find that we need to accommodate the electronification of paper. So what I mean by that is that PayProp pays, for example, all beneficiaries that need to receive money out of a rental transaction, mainly through ACH, but there's still a lot of check printing. So we have an automated process to print checks and send them off, because that's the only way you can do it.
So let me press pause there, because we haven't really explained what PayProp does. So as I understand it in layman's terms, I have an apartment block. I've got 100 apartments in there. I've got a bunch of tenants in there. Now I've got to bill them every month for their rent. And and I need to collect the money from them. There might be a property manager, people taking care of different maintenance, other things, rates and taxes, and so forth. And along comes PayProp to automate a bunch of that, to make it easier for the property owners who have apartments, rental units, to handle all of that. Is that what PayProp is about?
Yeah, our core customer is actually the property manager or the letting agent, depending on which territory you operate in. So typically someone that looks after, to use US terminology, a property manager that look after single family units of 50, 300, 500 on behalf of the owners of those properties. Those are our customers. So in that way, we automate a lot of the transactional and reporting administration processes that these property managers need to deal with every day. We take a lot of that step out of their lives so that they continue to focus on what they're good at, and that's looking after the property and dealing with the people side of things. So PayProp handles the whole transaction cycle, from collecting rent from tenants all the way through to dispersing those monies to all of those that benefit from the transaction. So whether that's the property manager with their commission, or a contractor, a plumber, or an electrician that did some work on a property, ultimately to the owner as well, the receipts that they have or proceeds that they have from those rental properties. And in the process, there's just a lot of notifications, reporting, statements, invoices, you name it. I mean, just the whole administration process. So it effectively becomes, in US terminology, the trust accounting environment for a property manager. Client accounting in the UK, That's where we talk about. And there are property legislation and regulations in the different territories that vary quite a lot. And PayProp sets itself up so that it helps the property manager to comply with those legislation. So, for example, in the US, we generate the necessary trust account reconciliations, which happens real time actually with PayProp. So it's always reconciled, which is quite a burdensome process for many property managers to come to the end of the month and do a reconciliation of their trust funds. PayProp does that real time because of our integration with the banking world. Everything that happens in PayProp has happened in the bank, and nothing can happen in the bank without it happening in PayProp. So that's kind of what we solve for property managers in that world.
Yeah. So it's good to understand that, because I think that parallels the expertise you have on the GivenGain side again, in terms of, I remember dealing with a guy from a nonprofit world, and we had a meeting where there'd been some issues around some joint project we were working on. And then he just said to his staff in this nonprofit organization, well, the issue is that Brett and I float differently. And afterwards I called him, I said, like, what's float differently? And they said, you come from the world of business where there's black and white and accountability and transparency and visibility. And I come from the nonprofit world. And so it sounds like you've overcome some of those problems, just utilizing good checks and balances, good technology, and good principles and practices.
Yeah, I think, Brett, for us, I mean, the core of GivenGain is about the fact that it's more blessed to give than to receive. So that positivity that comes from that has always been a core element of who we are as an organization. And then how we approach life. And that is, I mean, you guys have helped us a lot to distill that through the repurposing of business, which today we talk about the truth and care, which are the values that underpin everything that we do in our organization. So it's not just that we do transactions absolutely accurately. It is truth that is portrayed through the way we do that. And we do that because we want people to have more freedom in what they do, that they feel cared for. So when they engage with us, both on the GivenGain and the PayProp side, they know there's a bunch of people behind that make sure that technology does what it says it's going to do, and that your funds are always in a safe place, completely transparently reported. So we care for you in that way, and we excel on our customer service in both areas. It's something that we work really hard on. We always have a person on the other side of the phone line. We've steered away from chatbots and all kinds of things up till this day, and our customers value that significantly. And I think that personal approach to it, some people may argue, well, that must be quite costly. Well, it's not. We engage in a conversation with a customer for a long time. Yeah. We have PayProp customers that has been with us for 15 years since really we started the organization in South Africa, because we look after people. That's what we do.
So it's a big point there. So when you went through the repurposing business consultation, you were the CEO at that time for PayProp in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And you guys had obviously started out of a great route, off a good foundation with the right heart motivation. So the repurposing business thing wasn't like, okay, you guys are out there, a bunch of greedy capitalists trying to make money. Now you can do something for Jesus. It wasn't any of that. You had that figured out. But you had a chance, as I recall, to reflect on sharpening your purpose, as it were. And one of the things that I love is the consistency of purpose between PayProp and GivenGain. There's no duality of purpose. I mean, one is a for-profit mechanism, the other is a non-profit foundation, but there's a consistency of purpose, as I understand it.
Yeah, that's definitely the case, Brett. And I think what we found was that journey through repurposing helped us to see that connection. I think for us, still it was, we understood what our core was. We probably struggled a bit to translate that into the business world. So while we were doing it, we were not able to formulate why and how we do it. And certainly the repurposing process helped us a lot to translate what we were doing into the values that we have today, and really make the connection between the two organizations. And even today, I mean, I believe that the majority of the people that work for PayProp is there because of GivenGain. And it's because of the roots that they, you know what, I also think the younger generation of today, we often talk about the fact that they don't just want to do a job, they want to do something that's meaningful. Right. And that certainly is part of the PayProp GivenGain DNA, is that part of PayProp makes you also feel that I am part of something, not only PayProp is meaningful, but I'm attached to GivenGain that has a real meaningful purpose in life. Yeah.
So Andre, as an accountant, what percentage of businesses owned by Christians that have good intentions would you say have made the connection between their business and their ministry? What's your guess?
That'll be a wild guess. I don't know, Brett. I would have thought it's hopefully around a third, but it's probably less than that. I have found over the last few years, I mentioned a bit earlier, that I'm excited about the sense that God is raising up a lot of kingdom-minded people in business and making them aware of other kingdom-minded people around them. And I think probably for decades, we've been operating in a business world where we thought I'm on my own. And certainly, I guess part of our, especially the South African church background as well, perhaps there was a big separation between Sunday and the rest of the week, you know. So we were not guided or shown how to bring those things together. So I think there are lots of business people even today that are frustrated in the workplace because they're not equipped, or they don't know how to translate their belief system completely into the workplace. And let's face it, I mean, I'm just thinking about a very good friend of mine. We both at Open Doors. He's a high official in a bank. And when you're in that corporate structure in the City of London, there are many things that constrain you in terms of what you can do in terms of policy and procedures and how those big organizations operate. I think in a private company like ours, it's much easier for us to dictate on that. It's not impossible for someone in those mega organizations to do that. And you can probably do it in a team context, but even then you need to be so careful, because Bible talks about that. The world is out there to try to get us. And I mean, the criticism that you sometimes pick up from just making a comment, caring for someone, can I pray for you? And then someone overhears that and said, oh, you're not supposed to talk religion at work and stuff like that. You know, so I think it's difficult. I think for smaller organizations, private companies, perhaps the percentage is higher. I don't know. You've probably done research, so you're going to tell me now it's higher than that.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. So it gets back to PayProp, right? So you get clarity of purpose. And then did you go through a process to ripple that down into your organization? And what did that look like? So you got clarity on purpose. Did it do anything for your business processes, for your marketing, for your sales, for your how you handle things? What did that look like?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you were to test us on our scorecards, we probably won't do very well in that sense, in terms of being able to demonstrate how diligent we tackle each one of the P's and make sure that we always apply where we go. We are fortunate in our organization that the majority of our leadership are believers, and therefore it is easier to have those kind of conversations and remind people of what our core values are, and then to always bring that to the table whenever we are thinking about a business transaction, or thinking about a product, or thinking about the terms of a new product that we put out there. What does it mean to the recipient of that, or the purchasers of that product? So I think to a certain extent, many of those principles it's become part of who we are and how we operate. However, we still need to continuously remind each other. I mean, I find that particularly in the marketing and the sales environment, that we often have to say, well, does it feel right to do that? Mm-hmm. Is that the way? Is that transparent? Is that honest? Is that how we want people to see PayProp? I would rather walk away from something. A simple example. Recently, we had a small competition that we ran through a conference we did in the US, and we are not operating in all the states in the US yet. And the winner, because there was quite a lot of people at the conference, was from a state that we don't have a business in yet. So there was a bit of a debate. The whole idea was actually to try to sell to this person. Now we can't, because those were the terms. Anyone that was there could enter, and that person won the prize. So it needs to go to that person. So that sounds simple, but I mean, that is the kind of thing that we often have conversations. And I love it when we sit around a table and you observe how people get into that thinking. I mean, something else we do from a marketing point of view, for example, there's a lot of negative press out there. So part of what we do, PayProp tries to be a expert voice in our industry. So we pick up news and we try to bring that to the market, but we always look for the positive angle on all stories. In a way, it's not false, but it's just trying to encourage and being uplifting in what we do. And it's exciting for me to see what that does to people in the organization as well, because that changes the way you think about the outside world. It changes the way you think about how you speak to your customers and how you deliver the service that you deliver out there. So we can probably do a lot better, but there's a if you ask anyone within PayProp and GivenGain, what are the core values that we work with? I mean, truth and care will come through everywhere we move.
It's very interesting, because the world of media, if you like, thrives off negative stories in many respects, but would say, well, we're actually the truth tellers in society. I actually watched recently this week one of the big news networks. There were 4 or 5 people at a table, and they were complaining about Elon Musk's takeover bid for Twitter. And they were saying, like, we don't want some individual telling people what they should be thinking. That's our job, they said. And but with the spies that went into the promised land, 12 of them, and they came back with the same facts, but 10 of them had an evil report, the old translations say. And it's taking facts, but presenting them in a negative light or presenting them through the lens of faith. So I like what you're doing, looking for things that can be not whitewashed, but presented through the lens of faith, which aligns with your purpose of truth.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I think it gives people hope as well. It shows people that there's positive things to go for.
Yeah. Now, Andre, in your career as a buttoned-up accountant, I'm putting you in a box.
Well, I've been once, someone said to me, "You're not a normal accountant. You're more an Arthur Anderson type of accountant." That was shortly after the Enron debacle. I said, "Well, I'm not sure that I want that label, but anyway."
Oh boy! People know how to insult people, Yeah. But God has actually led you in some ways, or given you a heads up on some business things, some personal things through dreams. Tell me about 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah, I mean, one that particularly comes to mind, Brett, is a few years ago, and I'll probably have to check up the date on that, but I had a dream that I was going to an event, and the dream was, I mean, it was quite a battle to get to the event. I remember I needed to get to a specific room in a building, and the lift wasn't working, and we got stuck in the lift, and we prayed, and then the next moment we suddenly appeared in this room as if we miraculously were put in this room. So there was just a lot in terms of, okay, I need to be in a place. It's a small group of people, only 12 of us. It's going to be quite miraculous how you arrive there. There's going to be obstacles to get there. So it was just interesting, and that was the dream. A couple of weeks later, I was invited to a session by a mutual contact of us, Johan de Prier. And he had a number of people together in the room that there were two guys from the US that were looking to talk about how we facilitate global giving. And there were a bunch of people in the room that I knew from university, Christian friends, or people in asset management and so on. So it was a small group of people that were all interested in better deployment of capital, I guess, for kingdom purposes. Now, at that point, the two guys had a slide on the day that said, imagine you have a system that can move donations from one country in the world to any other country in the world. And I was obviously sitting there and saying, yeah, I can imagine that. I've seen that. GivenGain does that. So we've been doing that for 15 years. Now, the interesting thing about that dream and how that came about, I'm being in this room with people and that kind of conversation and connection happening, I had a real sense during the dream that this meeting of a group of like-minded people is going to be quite significant in opening up a number of opportunities. So I'll run through just a few events that happened after that. So Johan obviously knew about GivenGain and connected me with the two presenters after the meeting and said, I think André needs to show you GivenGain. So I showed them what we do in GivenGain and they were blown away that it existed. And as it happened at the time, Johannes, who lives in Switzerland, was in South Africa because this meeting took place in South Africa. And I said to them, would you be interested in meeting the founder of the organization? And obviously, yeah, that was great. I contacted Johannes. As it happened, he was available the next afternoon. So we set up the meeting. It was an interesting and a good conversation. And as part of that, Johannes invited them to Switzerland. They said their next stop is Switzerland because someone has told them that's the good place to go and set up a foundation. And Johannes said, well, as it happens, I'm there and I'm back home next week. So why don't we meet up and I'll introduce you to a few of our connections. They brought someone to the meeting that happened in Switzerland, a guy called Stefan Chivician, who lives in Florida, but is originally from Switzerland. And when they started to talk and just the small talk at the start of the meeting, it transpired that he actually grew up in the village where GivenGain is, which is in Villars in Switzerland. So there was that immediate connection between him and Johannes. And at some stage during the conversation, which was all about foundations and GivenGain and what have you, but obviously PayProp is always in the mix when we talk about these things. He said to Johannes, have you ever thought about taking PayProp to the US? And Johannes said, well, often, but we really don't know how to enter it. And he said, well, come to Florida. I'll introduce you to a few of you. So jump ahead, probably a year later, a few of us went. Stefan did amazing connecting us with believers in banks, in the legal framework and all of that. So we just had that sort of landing in the US that opened the doors for us to start to set up business there. And then I can round this up by saying that when we were challenged to move back to the UK, that was quite a journey for us as a family, also in praying about it and how it came about. But one of the things that I was really battling with the Lord about was exactly this group of kingdom-minded people in Cape Town that I started to connect with and meet with. And I really felt that that was so core to my calling that that's the place to be. It's amongst these like-minded people that are going to change the world from that perspective. So one of my challenges as I was praying about moving to the UK is to say, Lord, I don't understand this. I mean, this has been building up over 5 years. Why all of this? And while I was asking that question, the trip to Florida came up. And I went there and I met all of these people. And I remember very clearly one evening in the hotel thinking, André, I mean, the Lord is just showing you there are obviously kingdom-minded people, not only in Cape Town, but all over the world. And hence my sense that I mentioned a couple of times today is that the Lord is really raising up kingdom-minded people in business and connecting us all over the world for great things to come. So that's just one story. I mean, in brief, there are probably many bits in between that I can dwell on, but to keep it short.
And having the dream made you more open to these possibilities, these connections.
Yeah, indeed. I think that is also the ability to have an expectation, not to shy away from when the most bizarre phone call may come or something like that. And to also react to prompts. I mean, one would be, I'm back in the UK, and you will recall that I mentioned the CEO that said to me that you should throw us to the lions. So I come back into the UK. I thought, I should really connect with Stewardship Services again. I worked with them in the past, reached out and found that the guy who was CEO at Alexander Forbes at the time is now the CEO of Stewardship Services. The Lord has taken him. It's a guy called Stuart McCulloch. He's an amazing man of God. God has taken him on a journey, an amazing journey, since I saw him as CEO of Alexander Forbes. And here we are. I mean, at the time, I mean, we were working closely at Alexander Forbes, and there was at one stage quite a strategic conversation. I remember Stuart saying to me, that was before I resigned, he said to me, just stick with me, we're going to go places. And here we are, 12 years later, finding ourselves in the same space in the UK, where we're working with the same kingdom-minded goal. Two different organizations that are very complementary, and it's just those kind of things that make you realize that we are but well, how shall I say it? I mean, we're privileged that God is inviting us to be part of His journey, and He keeps on surprising me, and we shouldn't be surprised about how big His plan is. And
yeah, so the divine connection thing is quite interesting in the kingdom of God, and somewhat unique, and the world can have connections, and people set up huge organizations to do networking, and they join clubs, and they do all sorts of things. But in the kingdom of God, you have a natural bond with people from different nationalities, different places. There's that when the kingdom of God is in common, it actually can create an unfair competitive advantage if we're open to collaboration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And one of the things I know you and I agree on, Andre, is that the need is so big that believers who are dealing with this world of finance, your desire to get money into kingdom, think people, we need to collaborate in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, Brendan, that's something that I always ask the question whenever a new idea comes out, is to say, who else is doing this? Because I absolutely believe that perhaps may sound strange, but I wonder whether God needs to just do that. He can't rely on only one of us, because we're full of error, aren't we? So He does give the same vision to many people, but perhaps it's also because He wants us to be one, and work together in that. So something that when I'm a bit angry, I talk about, and I get very angry about the pride that makes us not talk to each other, or makes us think mine is the only one we can solve this problem. So collaboration is something that I feel strongly about. I mean, even just in normal business as well, I think there's real value if people can find a common cause that they can both contribute to, and to the benefit of all parties. So that is something that I'm passionate about. I'm always looking to see where people with the same objectives can share resources. There's a lot of waste. I mean, years ago, and I've not updated those stats, but when God gave me the calling about kingdom finance way back in 2001, I did a bit of research then on missionary budgets, for example. And at the time, the global spend on missions were about the same as the revenue of PWC, which was a global organization with 60,000 employees. And I looked at that, I said something like $9 billion at the time. And I just thought, I don't see $9 billion of impact in the kingdom world. And since then, I've seen a lot of the waste that happens in that space. I've traveled a lot in missionary environments. I've done some work in Lesotho, where a simple story there. If you That was, again, something I looked at in 2004, I think it was. At that point in time, that if you took all the money that came from the UK and the US into aid into Lesotho, and you just shared that equally amongst the 2 million plus people that live in Lesotho, you would get rid of poverty completely.
Yeah.
But still, you have a country where there's food shortage and all of that. So there's just, unfortunately, a dark side of it as well that we need to combat. All the time. But the desire for us to connect as kingdom-minded people, and at least share our stories so that we can find the points of connection. I think that is quite critical.
Yeah. Well, Andre, hats off and thanks to you and your colleagues who have set up GivenGain and maintained it, who've taken money that could have been spent on bonuses and bigger company cars and put it into infrastructure and created a climate within PayProp where people are giving on an ongoing basis, whether it's to GivenGain or other organizations, because it models also the fact that the separation between business and ministry is nonsense. In fact, the better your purpose, the better it is for the business and the better it is for humanity broadly as you leverage the channels over there. So thank you so much for that. And we look forward to exposing GivenGain more to our community. I mean, this is a great opportunity. So if people out there are a number of people within the repurposing business community, for example, that have gone on to run charities. They've gone back to countries where they've come from. They've stayed in their jobs, but they've set up halfway houses or they've set up orphanages. They've set up many things. And this is a platform that can be leveraged. One of our guys was a chess master. And when he realized that he could set up chess centers and effectively plant a church in a chess center in India, and he's done, last I checked, 36 of these. And so amazing. But so your technology, your platform can be used as an effective mechanism to get money from place to place. And but it's more than that, as you say. It's back to the point, which is it's better to give than to receive, to keep people in a framework of giving. So Andre, thank you so much. Thanks for your story.
Thank you very much, Brett. It's a privilege to journey with you. And yeah, thank you for all that you put into our lives. Appreciate it.
Somebody told me the other day, Brett, you say God's an accountant, but I don't think God's an accountant. I think he's a financial wizard or whatever it might be. But for the moment, we'll stick with God's an accountant, among many other things. And Andre, thanks for being one of God's finance people. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much, Brett. Appreciate it.